Hello, everyone. We're back. Jan Irvin and Joseph Atwill. This is UnSpun show number 42. I got to keep the intro short because we're having a lot of information to cover. Jan and I are interesting phenomena on the internet because there just seems to be a lot that's being written about us. This last week, I had they were coming at me from different angles, the Christian guys, the Shakespearean guys, and of course, the people who criticize my work in MK Ultra were posting articles. I didn't respond to any of them because they were simply too silly, and I think it sort of wastes time to roll around with pigs. However, there is something we do need to respond to, and that is an entire book that focuses quite extensively on Jan's work. Now, oddly enough, I haven't read the book. I will.
I have, unfortunately.
But Jan has.
Most of it.
I've read excerpts from it, but I'm just going to say, oddly enough, I know the author of the book quite well because he lives in my community, and he was a member of the World Business Academy, which I joined because they claimed that they were against Diablo Canyon, the nuclear plant that I would like to get rid of because it's too close to my house. But it turned out, after studying the World Business Academy, that it was founded by Willis Harman, good old MK Willis Harman. And so I was wondering about it. I go, what the heck? What is this World Business Academy? And who is this Jerry Brown character? And then, lo and behold, he says at this one meeting, he goes...
We should also say, before we just dive into this, that there's going to be two segments to this episode.
Yeah,
the first one focusing on this book, the second one... The second segment focusing on the Native American Church.
We're gonna try to show where how the Native American Church was MK Ultra'd, and then a lot of the history about their participation.
Well, how it is MK Ultra essentially of the 1800s. Not
okay. Anyway, we're just going. So we're gonna focus on, to start off with, this book called The Psychedelic Gospels by Dr. Jerry Brown. Jerry,
not the governor of California,
right? Different guy, but he comes
different from communist.
Comes from Cornell, that hotbed of MK Ultra. He is he's a member of the World Business Academy.
He was a professor of anthropology. He's a weaponized anthropologist at the Florida International University at Miami.
He's got a really curious VC. So anyway, he gave this presentation about the book, and I'm not sure if I noticed Jan about this or if he had sent you an email.
Oh no, well we were all going to go, remember? And he.
I'm just wondering, did I tell you about the meeting, or did he contact you? Or
well, he had contacted me, I think,
okay.
and I was going to go, but then I started seeing him posting these ridiculous things about Albert Hoffman and Bicycle Day, glorifying the official version of the story. And he had already told me in private phone conversations that he had read all of my work, that my articles were amazing. And then he's out endorsing Albert Hoffman and Gordon Wasson and others on his page like they're these great heroes.
Let's jump right in. So okay, so you've got the book and you've read it. Give us
I've read most of it.
Okay,
now, in my I believe it was in my Spies in Academic Clothing article, I mentioned that I felt that there was a blueprint for a lot of these books. Well, I do think that this is based on a blueprint. I mean, if you lifted the rosy stories about Gordon Wasson from most of the other books out there, except for mine, about Gordon Wasson and his whole history and all of this, that's pretty much the first 70, 80 pages of Dr. Jerry Brown's book. Now, later on in the book, he does say that he goes to Harvard, and Lisa actually lets him in, because in my articles, Lisa doesn't let me in, which is kind of funny. But he does get let in with his wife into the Harvard archives, and he says by the time he's done there, he's disgusted because he realizes that Wasson misrepresented everything and made a bunch of profit on it. Well, I already exposed that in my book, The Holy Mushroom, and in a lot more detail. What he also does is he completely omits, which he knew because he talked to both you and I, he completely omits that Wasson was CIA working with MK Ultra Subproject 58. And in fact, on the phone with me, he told me that he was going to intentionally avoid that topic just to promote the dialogue. And then what he does is he takes like there's one section, I forget where it is. I marked it with the flag. You can see I got a bunch of flags all throughout this, but I marked it with a flag where he takes a comment almost directly out of the introduction of my book, The Holy Mushroom, to talk about, have a dialogue with his wife about how, this schism between Wasson and Allegro was a huge ordeal. Well, that's my book. That's my work. That's what I wrote about. But what he does is he plays down all of the discoveries. He brings up this guy that I actually had a bunch of really psychotic emails from back in 2013, 2014. This guy by the name of Tom Hatzis. And this guy sent me just numerous outrageous emails, and I'm going to pull some of them up here on screen. The guy was completely obnoxious. He was sending these, claiming to be an academic, and he kind of acted a lot like somebody else that you debated recently that was just, you couldn't reason with them. You couldn't supply them any facts. And so Dr. Jerry Brown actually cites this guy. And I told him in my phone conversation with him last January or February that the guy was not credible. But so he goes ahead and he cites this guy. And this is this guy, Tom Hatzis. He goes by Agrippa Ware. But he says, I own you. Please bring the fake material to the debate. You are scared shitless of me, coward. All of these ridiculous name-calling emails. This is the kind of stuff that I have to deal with. More dodgy bullshit. No matter what, I sent him all of the citations to all of the points here, and all I get back from this guy is all of these attacks on me. He won't address or stick to any of the facts. And then when we pull up his background, we discover that he's writing for Disinformation Corporation, which Disinformation Corporation we've exposed as being tied to Kenneth Anger and the Satanists. We have Abby Martin in there. Graham Hancock is published in there. But Tom Hatzis is published by them and also Park Street Press. Ironically, Tom Hatzis was also working with the guy who's in the introduction of his book on witchcraft here. But this guy who helps him is this guy, Simon Powell. Well, Simon Powell is the same Simon Powell who launched all of the attacks against me on Red Ice Radio and Radio 314 with Lana back in 2012. That's who Jerry Brown is citing, is this guy, Tom Hatzis, who's working with this other group that's already attacked me. Well, Graham Hancock has launched attacks on me. He's part of Disinformation Corporation. Other people working with Park Street Press have also launched attacks on me, including, obviously Tom Hatzis, including Jim Fadiman that we did the microdosing episode on recently. But what we're beginning to see because of this, Joe, is, and we discussed Trine Day publishers a couple of weeks ago in our exposure of Hamamoto and Steve Hager and a lot of these other guys. I've had like 6 or 7 attacks by authors out of Trine Day. Well, I started noticing these patterns. There's a cell of attackers out of Trine Day. There's a cell of attackers out of Park Street Press. There's a cell of attackers out of Disinformation Corporation. Ironic name. So what I think we're actually beginning to see here, Joe, is that these big publishing houses are actually cells. And I need to flesh out a lot more of the authors that publish with Park Street Press and Inner Traditions, and also Ronin Publishers, City Lights Publishers. But, what I'm thinking is that these publishing houses are actually intelligent cells. And then you'll see them cite each other. So, Hatzis is at Park Street Press, and so is Jerry Brown. And so he's citing another guy within his own cell, if I'm correct on this theory, who's attacking me, right? And then, Hatzis is a part of this other cell with Graham Hancock, who is attacking me. And so then, if we go back, like we talked about a couple weeks ago with Shrine Day, we have Chris Bennett, Hank Albarelli, Jay Dyer, Daryl Hamamoto, Stephen Hager, etc., all who have attacked me out of just Shrine Day. If you're, for you coincidence theorists out there. And so, what we're beginning to see, though, is how publishing houses are, in my opinion, it seems to me, the evidence is appearing to indicate at this point that these publishing houses are these intelligent cells, and that when we look at Park Street Press and Inner Traditions, they publish a huge majority of the psychedelic books. So does City Lights, and so does Ronin. And so, and we look at Shrine Day, and they publish a lot of the conspiracy books, like Lee Harvey Oswald's mistress, Judy Very Baker, has tried to mislead people about me contacting her 5 or 10 times about if she had ever spoken with Gordon Wasson when she was interacting with Lee Harvey Oswald, because Judy Very Baker, worked at Riley Coffee Company. She was Lee Harvey Oswald's mistress. Lee Harvey Oswald was hanging out with George de Mohrenschildt. George de Mohrenschildt and his brother, Dmitri von Mohrenschildt, were close friends of Gordon Wasson. And then George de Mohrenschildt turns up dead when the media is on the way to his house. So Judy Very Baker is a member of Shrine Day, and she's misleading this. And some author who contacted us several months ago tried to make a big stink about Judy. Claims that I never really talked to her about this stuff, when I had emails and Facebook screen captures of multiple attempts at this. But so what I think is going on here is these cells. What I think is also happening is that we're beginning to see a blueprint where, the official storyline is adhered to very closely by Jerry Brown. And, you and I talked off the air, Joe, and I think you have a very good idea. I think that, I'm in 100% agreement with you that when you state that Jerry needs to pull this book out of print until the information on Wasson and the CIA's Subproject 58 program is correct, because what Jerry does, instead of facing MKUltra Subproject 58 head on, he creates this whole nonsense that he took from a point that I made in my Gordon Wasson, the Man, the Legend, the Myth article. And he tries to make it sound like he stumbled across it too. But as I recall in my conversation with him, he got it from me. And by the way, I had already published it 8 years ago. But that's Gordon Wasson, who was the vice president of propaganda for JP Morgan Bank, which he also omits, was the account manager to the Vatican. And so this is the case that this weaponized anthropologist, Jerry Brown, builds up to avoid Wasson's whole, situation with the CIA, and why he's doing all of this disparaging stuff against Allegro and everything. So what it appears to me is an entire limited hangout based primarily off of your and especially my work, Joe.
Right. I think that our shows are starting to cut. I think that if you look at the internet traffic about Wasson, about MKUltra's participation in the counterculture, basically it's through the roof. And so the fact that culture is starting to wake up to what happened, and what is still perhaps happening, and in my opinion it is, would suggest that they would launch some kind of response to us. And I think maybe we're starting to see it. Now, in Jerry's case,
the CIA has lost control of the dialogue, and they are desperately scrambling to get control of it again, because if everybody realizes, like even Wikipedia does now, that Wasson was CIA MKUltra Subproject 58, and that the whole team down to Oaxaca, Mexico were agents, then if everybody realizes that, then nonsense publications like this book can go nowhere. Well, I mean, he goes through every point I make in my work, and he tries to dance around it and soften it and create a sophist approach to it.
Right. Well, just as far as what is the problem for the controllers of our culture, there is now very solid evidence going both backwards and forwards from Wasson, backwards to Gregory Bateson, and the whole concept of
and Huxley,
and I mean, and then forward. I mean, I think the Grateful Dead are now just completely outed as a member of the government's project because.
Well, Hans and I aren't done yet. Wait till that's done, Joe. Don't give it all away yet.
You know, and so because they we show in our work that there's just too many secret societies that they're members of, and that you can plug individuals into their the creation of the Grateful Dead, like Alan Trist. Trist is the son of the founder of the Tavistock Institute, and the fact that this guy shows up in their world in 1960 is simply, highly suspicious. And then, of course, a member of their organization, Robert Hunter, their lyricist, had an employment situation with MK Ultra, purportedly that he was using the period of time as a human experiment, but this, of course, is just another, eyebrow rolling kind of moment because, this is just beyond any kind of, reasonable probability that the group that helped promote the original acid test and got the Haight-Ashbury culture, drug culture established, also had an accidental employment contract with MK Ultra. Is just preposterous. So anyway, so they're starting to basically to address us. I don't know if Jerry's book is the first attempt, because I think that there may be something else going on. I just want to mention, they may also now be trying a second psychedelic drug counterculture.
Well, absolutely, and they're ramping up very quickly now because of us.
And it's just that
I've noticed that ever since they rolled out Amber Lion against us, specifically.
And so what I'm thinking is that our work happened to intersect, a second wave where they were now going to be promoting another kind of get lost in a culture of drugs that's controlled by the government and takes you into a debased state. So anyway, that's why, like with Jerry, I think it would be great, and I do run into him from time to time, and you better believe.
Well, you got to get him on the show, man, and tell him to pull this tripe from print until he comes on the show and explains itself and corrects it.
I think that he needs, just ethically, he needs to insert into the book the truth about Gordon Wasson and about Subproject 58.
Well, and not use Tom Hatzis, which I told him almost a year ago that I had refuted Hatzis's remarks on air. And I recommend everybody check those shows out that this is the one. This is my rebuttal from June 17th, 2013, and this is Tom Hatzis, this character here, who supposedly debunks me, and he basically goes on a slanderous diatribe on Vinny's show and totally misconstrues my work, my citations. What he did was he took 2 or 3 images from the very back of the book and then says, because I was wrong on my interpretation of 3 of these images, like St. Walburgis and a couple of others, that, well, the whole book is wrong, even though he doesn't cite anything. These 2 images right here he attacks. I addressed this image very clearly in this episode with Vinny Eastwood, but if you can believe it, and I told Jerry about this interview, if you can believe it, he ignored everything in my refutation and actually claims that Hatzis, quote unquote, roundly criticized me. Well, all Hatzis did was attack these 3 images, and I suggest, based on another interpretation of my other book, that these 3 mushrooms representing the nails are actually mushrooms here, and that Saint Walburga is actually holding a baby amanita there, which he argues is a vial. Never mind a vial of what. Still brings up the issue of what the hell was in the vial, and not only that she was part of all of these fertility cults and all of this stuff before she became a saint for the church. And then, he ignores all of the other images I use. But what's interesting is also Jerry cites Tom Hatsis in his critique of me in this book. And then Jerry cites a bunch of the same exact images that I use in the back of my book as substantiation for his theme. Now, how does that work that you say I'm roundly criticized because of 2 or 3 images, of which he ignores my rebuttal, and then use the very images that I use in my own book? This is my book here. That's the same image right there as on the cover, Dr. Jerry Brown. So, you know, it's just absurd contradictions. What they're trying to do is use a poisoning the well fallacy, because they disagree with the interpretation of these handful of images. And one of them was because of an error by Chris Bennett with the salamander and the tree, which we had a long discussion about that 3 years ago. This image here, which Chris cited it from the Bodleian Library, but I got attacked for it because I cited Chris for it. And it turns out that it was from a Christian bestiary, which is even more interesting because we see the mushroom tree with the salamander burning. Apparently, Tom Hatsis actually believes that the salamander literally goes into the tree or something. And then we see the guy up here holding his head like he's under the influence of the drug, with something in his hand there, like he's dancing high or something. So I got attacked because Chris Bennett, also from Trine Day, cited it to the Bodleian Library at Oxford when it was really this Christian bestiary. So these were my grave errors. And meanwhile, he goes through, here's another image that I use that he also cites. Here's 2 more images that I use that he also cites. Here's several more images that I use that he also cites. And so what he did was he cherry-picked these few instances in this book to say that I was roundly criticized. And then what he also does, I haven't found in his book. See, I was the first ever to publish this ancient Christian text called the Epistle to the Renegade Bishops from the Mount Athos Monastery from the 1600s by Ivan Wyszynski, discussing the wonder of the holy mushroom and how the holy mushroom came and saved the monastery. And that all of this was announced to the entire Christian ecumene. Now, it appears...
Let me interject something, Jan.
Wait. Just let me finish this thought. So Jerry apparently omits that text. Now, I haven't read the rest of it. I did check the index for that. I haven't seen any reference to the Epistle of the Renegade Bishops, but he dodges that citation. And then what they do is they say, all of my work is based on these images, and, oh, the images are images, and that's what they are. That's what I claim. Never mind that I had an actual canonized Christian text discussing the holy mushroom, the title of the book.
Okay, let me interject. I think that, you know, the sort of the battles of scholarship is clearly one that, you know, is basically constructed to cast dispersion on you so that...
Oops, and I'm sorry, folks. I had the screen shared, and I thought I had the camera going the whole time.
So that, because, you know, the idea is that if they can basically show that the scholarship has errors, then the general conclusion of the scholarship, you know, is diminished. But the point I really think I want to focus on is that, and the reason why the book should be, basically, I would ask Jerry to pull it from the shelves of all of the bookstores, is that it does not tell the truth about Gordon Wasson.
Well, and not only that, Joe, even worse, it's...
Let me finish my thought.
It glamorizes.
Let me finish my thought. The fact is that there is now just something that every citizen and every author that is in this field needs to recognize, is that Wasson, who was the founder of the counterculture, basically, was working for the CIA. This isn't something that is conjectured. We have the documents to prove it. So when a new psychedelic proponent like Jerry Brown comes forward,
he's supposedly not even new, Joe. Supposedly he taught psychedelics in the university for 40 years.
The book is, when a new book...
Which means he's either incompetent or complicit when you judge his scholarship.
When a new book is written, it has to include this information. And so that's why I'm asking, if I see him, I'm actually going to give him an email to this effect, that it is just ethically and in terms of professional scholarship a requirement. And you know, Jan, here's what really kind of gets under my skin. I talked to Jerry Brown about this. We had an eyeball to eyeball discussion before the book was released. And I knew that the title of the book was The Psychedelic Gospels. And I asked him, I said, what's going on with Wasson? Because I know you'd had an exchange with him, and I'd actually gotten into that email exchange. So when I saw him, I said, hey, Jerry, so what's up with Wasson? And he went sideways. I didn't get a really clear answer as to
well, his whole book goes sideways,
right.
Joe.
Well, now that it's out, I understand. But anyway, that bothers me because I feel like I wasn't really told the truth in our actual physical exchange. And so that's why I'm going to speak to him about this, and I'm going to see if he'll come on the show. Because, you know...
Yeah, Jerry, please do come on the show, because I'd like to ask a lot of these questions directly myself. You know, like his whole discussion on Maria Sabina, he does, you know, he goes into a whole chapter on Ulysses, but he avoids the fact, after he told me personally that my scholarship was exceptional, he avoids that we exposed Ulysses in the Manufacturing the Deadhead article as ancient mind control run by the Eurymolpids and the Kirknes families. And that went on for almost 2,000 years. So, and then he's glorifying that. He, you know, Joe, he even uses the word entheogen throughout the book. After I wrote my paper exposing the word entheogens and Carl Ruck's fraudulent scholarship on that, and he cites Carl Ruck throughout the book. He compares my work to Carl's. When I out Carl in this same book here, I exposed Carl's scholarship, and Carl endorsed my book and my exposure of him.
Well, Jan, he gives public speeches, and I attended one, where he promotes psychedelics and yet doesn't reference the truth concerning Gordon Wasson, which I think anyone who wants to do a promotion of psychedelics needs to be aware of, and also to basically include that in the information you give the public. Because, you know, Jan, don't you think that the public deserves to know this when someone is trying to give them psychedelic drugs?
Sure. Well, yeah, you know, and Joe, he repeatedly throughout his book, do you realize that he cites all these scholars that you and I are, you know, and especially Jay Fikes and I have already exposed?
Yeah.
You know, and he's basing his whole theory on that, you know, and it's, you know, see, folks, and I should also make clear that I am the publisher of John M. Allegro's book that is the foundation of this whole argument that's been going on in academia for 50 years. And then I published the sequel to Allegro's book, which is my Holy Mushroom book. So, you know, the Holy Mushroom book is the foundation to our whole exposure of MK Ultras. So what they have is people from Park Street Press and Disinformation Corporation going around doing these hit piece attacks on me, going on to Vinnie Eastwood's show, etc., doing a bunch of spin to make us look bad, and then they go on to cite their own spin. You know, so now, even after I told Jerry that I had refuted Thomas, that, you know, and I showed, you know, some of his crazy emails on the screen earlier. I mean, I put up with Hatzis's, you know, crazy ramblings and emails for months. I had to, you know, I did a whole rebuttal that took up like a whole weekend of my time with my son to put the notes together to refute his nonsense on Vinny's show. And then they dragged this nonsense out as if I didn't already deal with it. And then Hatzis also lied that I didn't refute him in February in the emails when he went on Vinny's show like 9 months later, whenever it was. You know, so he had already had the emails when I went through line by line through his fallacious sophist spin. And then he goes all over the internet telling people that I refuse to respond to him. You know, and so this is who this so-called professor of anthropology and psychedelics from Miami International University, that's who this so-called academic is citing. Now, there are a few places where I will give Jerry credit for actually knocking Wasson, like when he goes into the Harvard archives and realizes Maria Sabina's, you know, how he utilized Maria Sabina, and he comes out angry. But, you know, how about being angry and telling the public, well, Wasson was MK Ultra Subproject 58, and then you don't have to write a whole sophist book trying to make up excuses and a whole story narrative with you and your wife, Julie, about why Wasson would do this. Oh, well, Jan Irvin published that he was the account manager for the Vatican. We'll just sidestep the whole Council on Foreign Relations, CIA, all of these big issues, vice president of propaganda for JP Morgan Bank, and we'll just go with the account rep for the Vatican routine. Come on, Jerry. I mean, that's a pretty sad limited hangout. If you think you're going to get control of the dialogue with nonsense like this, it's not going to work.
But Jerry,
go ahead, and then we need to switch gears over to peyote.
I just wanted to wrap this up by saying, look, Jerry is very interesting, very exciting, because there is a real chance that we have someone here who's actually related into the MKUltra project. I certainly don't mean to be disparaging about Jerry.
He's been a professor of psychedelics for 40 years. Maybe he is, and he's an anthropologist.
And at the very least, Jerry should be able to provide tremendous insights into the organization, because there's no doubt that he has come so close to it so many times in his life and all these that.
Sure. I mean, he's clearly aware of how the CIA works by this sophist pen. Jerry, come on the show and let's crack this nut, buddy.
Because if I were in his shoes, I would want to make sure that my reputation was not sullied by all of the coincidences.
I think it's too late.
I'm just saying the coincidences that swirl around him that would lead someone to suspect him as being part of the project. So because of these unfortunate coincidences, Jerry should probably be anxious to come on the show.
Right. And explain to the world why
what happened.
The conclusion of his book, Spin My Work. There's my name right there. That's the appendix. And then he tries to clump me together with scholars that I clearly exposed as using disinformation in this book, which he cites at least a half a dozen or a dozen times in his book. So then why is he trying to clump me together with the very scholars that I already exposed? Come on, Jerry.
Right. Well, I think that, with my interaction with Jerry, I'm going to try to steer him away from the scholarship battles with you, because I think that they all have to be resolved. And obviously you need to do that, because he's basically not giving an accurate representation of your commercial and scholastic work. But Jerry is very exciting to me as someone who might give unique insights into the organization today. Now, this could be because...
That's presuming that he has integrity, right?
Well, you see, the thing is, it is with the certainty that his life has swirled many times close to the organization, that he certainly has been promoting psychedelic drugs.
Well, he's got David Crosby from Crosby, Stills and Nash out promoting this. What do you?
Yeah. So he's right. So there's a Laurel Canyon character that Dave McGowan asked a lot of questions about. So let us get.
He even had the nerve to autograph it for me and say, "In praise of my book, The Holy Mushroom," if you can believe that. Yeah. While it's spin away from my work.
Right. Well, anyway, so that is our bizarre connection into Jerry Brown, someone that I know personally, someone that Jan knows personally, someone who autographs his book, and yet there is all these questions that need to be answered before we can come to a clear understanding of who this guy really is and what kind of organization he's involved with. We will keep the public informed on our communication with Jerry.
Absolutely, we will. And you know what? I think we should do probably a follow-up on this book, once.
I'm not kidding. I'm going to try to get him to come on the show. I'm going to say, look, you need to come on the show because...
Yeah, tell him bring David Crosby on with him too, I mean, he lives near you.
Yeah, I mean, I have neighbors all over the place that we could just show up. But the thing is,
while you're at it,
I really want Jerry to come on the show. I think he could just be incredibly valuable for the public that is now starting to wake up about Subproject 58. That's starting to wake up about the real origin of the Grateful Dead, about
the counterculture,
Ken Keyes, right? That all of this information now that's out, all this real scholarship that's in existence. Man, Jerry can really help promote it. He can help expand it.
Expose it. How about that?
Expose it, and he can clarify it. So,
and clarify, what appears to be intentional sophism, since he contacted me stating that he had read all of my work, and that my scholarship was exceptional, and that omits the fact that Wasson is CIA and all of this stuff, and has to set up all of this fancy spin and, two-step to be able to work out an argument that he does in this phony dialogue with his wife Julie. Yes. But
let's go on, because
let's skip over to peyote.
But your agreement with me, we have an open invitation to Dr. Jerry Brown. It's open.
Absolutely. Dr. Jerry Brown, Joe and I both come on.
He has my phone number.
I'll draw, because once I figured out what you were doing, Jerry, the truth of the fact is I spoke with Joe. We didn't think you were going to give an honest presentation of the facts. So I didn't bother to drive up to see your presentation back in April in Santa Barbara. But I'll agree this time that if you, agree to actually discuss facts and not use sophism, that, I'll even drive up to Joe's. It's a 3-4 hour drive for me. I'll drive up there.
A series of shows, and particularly if Jerry wants to get into helping us expose MK.
Sure. Now,
what's going on today?
We should get on to the next topic.
Because it's a related topic. It's very interesting, too. It's related to the show we did last couple weeks ago.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, Joe and I did a show called Teonanacatl, the sacred mushroom of sacrifice and suicide. And so the reason why that is important is because it goes into another topic that I want to discuss today, and that is a drug called peyote. Now, here is the talk that Joe and I did a couple of weeks ago. That's episode number 40. That was before I was sick, so it was about 3 weeks ago, actually. This is a very important episode because in it, I go through all of the original primary texts in the Florentine Codex to show what the Nahuatl, which are the Aztecs essentially, what they had to say about the mushrooms, etc., and how they use them. And almost all of the references about the quote-unquote sacred mushroom deal with human sacrifice and suicide. And so what's interesting is that the Florentine Codex also appears to be where we get the name peyote or peyote. Now, I don't know if, are you a coincidence theorist, Joe?
I'm not well known for that.
You're not well known as a coincidence theorist?
I'm more someone who believes in conspiracy than
Okay, so what we have here's peyote in the center here, and then if we go up into the Nahuatl, we find that's the Aztecs language that goes up into the Aztecs. Now, in the Florentine Codex, and I wish I had brought them down, but these are the quotes directly out of the Florentine Codex. This one is book 10. This one is book 11. And you can find these on page 173 and 129. I do cite them exactly, unlike almost every other quote-unquote scholar and anthropologist and whatnot I've seen out there. But so these citations are where we essentially get the name peyote from. Now, peyote, that's how the Aztecs referred to it. Now, peyote appears to be named by the people that we got it from. Let me see, where did it go? I had a citation to the Huichol. Now, the Huichol apparently call it Hikuri. Now, of course, Jay Fikes, who's been on the show, he actually lived with the Huichol. He's one of the world's leading Huichol experts. He's helped us expose Carlos Castaneda, etc. So as far as I can tell, it's called Hikuri, but Jay would better be able to tell us the history of this. Now, this is a totally different word than peyote. Now, the Huichol, most of the surviving peyote religion came from the Huichol. We do have a history of this one tribe using peyote, and then, or as they called it, Hikuri. And then, so peyote from the Aztec texts spreads out. Now, apparently there is no historical knowledge of peyote use by Native Americans in the United States or Canada until the late 1850s. And then what we see is in 1890, 1891, is this organization spring up called the Native American Church. Now, the Native American Church is interesting because it's an amalgamation of Huichol peyotism and Christian Protestantism. And then this is spread out essentially as the new Native American religion. It's actually a weaponized religion. It's a Trojan horse, and it was promoted by Kawana Parker, apparently, and Kawana Parker was appointed by the federal government as a principal chief of the entire Comanche Nation, even though he was never elected. Now, Kawana Parker becomes the emissary of the Southwest for the indigenous Americans of the United States. And then he later in his life, he advocated the Native American Church, and then he becomes deputy sheriff of Lawton in 1902. And so he becomes, he was the son of Peta Nakona, the real Comanche chief, and Cynthia Ann Parker, who is kidnapped by the Comanches and raised by them. And so he is their offspring. He's half white and half Comanche. And so this guy becomes essentially the key promoter. This is him here. He becomes the key promoter of the Native American Church. And then he also becomes the de facto head of the Comanches by essential appointment of the U.S. government. And then we have this weaponized anthropology being taken from now somebody, whomever it was, had to have been studying the Florentine Codex in the 1800s. It was written in the 1600s. And they took their knowledge of peyote and they amalgamated it with Protestantism. And they released it, apparently, from what it looks like, on my opinion, onto the Native American population. And so you in one aspect, like they did to the hippies of the 60s with Teonanacatl, which is also out of the Florentine Codex, they released this onto the Native Americans to neutralize their protesting efforts, their war efforts, etc., and to essentially to pacify them. Again, exactly what they did with the hippies of the 60s with the magic mushrooms or Teonanacatl, which we can see right here. That goes into the 60s, Gordon Wasson, and then we have, this spread out from Life magazine into MK, from MK Ultra Subproject 58 here. So it appears that the U.S. government, if I'm right, it could have been somebody other than Kawana Parker who did it. But one of these people helped the U.S. government and then infiltrated the essentially the Native American beliefs of the Kiowa people and the Comanches, both of them out of Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is also where we have the first record of, as far as I recall, the first record of peyote being used religiously in the continental United States and Canada outside of Mexico. Now, how it just jumped all the way over there is another interesting thing. And years ago, I did a show with Dr. Robert Beckstead and James Warren Mooney, who's the founder of the Akluvueha Native American Church. And that's a whole other questionable story in itself. But Joseph Smith, apparently there's a lot of symbolism that suggests that Joseph Smith was leading the early Mormon congregation.
Let's get into Joseph Smith, but I want to...
Yeah, well, hold on. Let me just finish my sentence. Just, using peyote, scopolamine again, and Amanita muscaria mushrooms. Go ahead. Okay, well, what I want to say is that a synopsis of this, trajectory is that the American natives' use of psychedelic drugs is far later than the recent histories that have been given to, the counterculture, that this is some kind of... Well, there's minimal use. You do see a little bit here and there, but it's very spotty. My point is it's later. You don't have really any kind of tradition showing going way back, and it's far more narrow. There's only one or two tribes. This is being then sold to the public as a widespread religious idea. And in fact, and this is really a critical insight that is basically original to Jan, is that then the drug was then sold to the Native American various tribes as a part of their ancient religion, as a kind of
revival, and that story then was reused in the 60s with the hippies. So what we're looking at is an incredibly long cultural debasement of different ethnicities by some group inside the United States government, which has an awareness
but
drugs damage culture.
Now we need to make clear, Joe, that it wasn't just the Native Americans that were targeted, because from the 50s onward, white culture was also targeted. So this needs to be made very clear, because, you know, if white people are being targeted and blacks are being targeted and Native Americans and Asians are being targeted, that means there's likely another group behind all of this.
Exactly.
So this
such a key point, because see, what you're showing is that this is an argument that we can take to the American Indian tribes. They are in general in opposition to the white people because of the colonization. But if we can show them, no, it wasn't, you know, a general philosophy. We in fact suffered from the same problem. It was a specific rifle shot against your culture from this tiny group that is actually controlling political power inside of the United States. And that's something that can hopefully then unify the people across the ethnicities, that the way they atomize us, they break apart the African Americans, they break apart from the white kids, they have shattered us into these little entities while they rule. To resist them, we need to kind of energize more cooperation rather than having fighting among ourselves. So anyway, we don't have a lot of time, and I really want let's go into Joe Smith.
Well, hold on a second, because I was speaking with Lydia Whitecalf last night, who is the wife of Royce Whitecalf, and she's been on my show before. Royce Whitecalf is one of the last survivors of the Pine Ridge Massacre by the FBI back in the day. And, she and I were going over this information, and notice how even here they're calling peyote an entheogen. So Carl Ruck's work is being promoted everywhere. They're trying to strip the word psychedelic and hallucinogen out, per my article, Entheogens, What's in a Name, that exposes the whole history of that fraud. But so what Lydia found very important, and I want to cover this in the last few minutes because she sent me like 5 paragraphs to read, is this symbol here of the Native American church insignia. She states that this is entirely wrong, and it shows in the insignia itself how they are crooked and what they're doing in the symbolism of the teepee. And she writes, using Lakota sacred knowledge for reference, astronomical facts that are shared universally throughout human history is the first aspect of sacred knowledge, and therefore becomes the subject of cosmology. The real importance of this topic is that world religions have the identical knowledge and bury it into the religious esotericism, which to be misused for the dark arts. In the last 6,000-year history of empire, wherever the colonizer goes, this is the first material to be destroyed and hidden from populations already under colonization. I think she may be referring to the Aztecs, the Aztec massive empire that took over much of Mesoamerica. Religion is used as the primary tool to confuse the cosmic with the mythic, and both with the literal and the historic. This is mass mind control. What is at the core is of the cover-up is our current solar sun, like I discussed in astrotheology and shamanism, the cataclysm that caused the Earth to tilt 25.3 degrees, the most recent pole star, which is Polaris, begrudgingly using English to indicate the following core truths, for there is no possible accurate transliteration with sacred language, I begin the following. And she goes on. The Lakota understand that ceremonies done on earth are at the same time being actualized simultaneously in the quote-unquote spirit world. The Bible will refer to the spirit world as heaven, a word that is specifically misleading. The spirit world is 2 phenomena at once, the non-physical world here on earth and the astronomical and cosmic above. It defines all that is spiritual with this reference to the astronomic, cosmic, and stellar. It is known by the Lakota as the Wainiya of Wakan, Tonka, and the holy breath of the Great Spirit. The Lakota understand that the physical world is a living mirror and recipient, and I talked about this in my book, Astrotheology and Shamanism, the whole as above, so below theme, which I do believe that psychedelics were, I misunderstood the application of psychedelics in that book and how they were actually used for ancient mind control, which we've since exposed. But continuing here, mere recipient of the non-physical forces that make all life, just as do the Illuminati, for this is the basis of their dark powers, just as it is the basis of the powers of humankind as original peoples for all the health of the world. The physical earth is literally a map or representation of the spirit world or cosmos above our heads. This gives understanding to the issue of the sacred sites. Therefore, the other knowledge buried by the dark artists or Illuminati. As the sun moves through the ecliptic during the yearly cycle, it passes over areas that can receive great supernatural forces, most especially and crucially sites that are the markers of the ellipses and the solstices. We can say it this way: what is happening in the stellar world is also being done on Earth in the same way at the corresponding place at the same time. A hierophany can occur, sacred power can be drawn down, attunement to the will of Wankan Tonka, the Christian call this God, can be achieved. A hierophany is a manifestation of the sacred. The word is a formation at Greek, adjective hieros, the verb feigning, to reveal, to bring to light. The two physical items of the Lakota are instruments that achieve the actualization of the sacred forces occurring on Earth from the cosmic, the sacred pipe, the Lakota, the Kanupa, and the teepee. Both are representations of astronomical knowledge, and this is where it gets good here, on the physical level, and the cosmic mythic knowledge on the spiritual level. Both ensure what is known as mirroring, or in the Lakota, I can't pronounce that, Kapemni, in both worlds simultaneously. This is co-opted by the Illuminati and in its axiom, as above, so below, which I just mentioned. And I'm getting, well, it's more than 5 paragraphs. I'm getting fairly close here. Let me just wrap this up because I think it's good. This can be a conversation to be elaborated upon, but simply put, the teepee is a mirror of the cosmos, which is the living and the crucial truth about the teepee. The center pole inside the other 12 poles is aligned with the pole star no differently than all the obelisks, both past and present, erected for the same purpose. And the other phallic symbols of human history one finds around the world in ancient sites are markers for the pole star. The Lakota do not apply the male-female separation to their world view, so they would never erect only a male symbol not integrated into the female, which is the teepee itself. Both combine and fuse together. The teepee is also the receiving vortex of sacred powers, the upward triangle, which is the bottom half of the Star of David, meeting the triangle above, which is the upper half of the Star of David, the hexagram of the Illuminati, as the teepee is round and three-dimensional, as opposed to the primary symbol of the dark arts, the hexagram, which is flat and two-dimensional. The teepee allows for the full reception of sacred powers for all the humans living in the world to view equally and abundantly for the benefit of all that is. The misuse of this principle is the beginning of the separation of mankind from this potential and connection to the sacred forces of the Creator, to the detriment of all that is and all that and all the lives. The Kanupa connects to the movement of the sun through the ecliptic in its yearly journey through the same constellations that are revered by the dark arts, primarily the Big Dipper, and its journey around the pole star, and through Aries and Triangulum, the tracking of Sirius, Procyon, Castor, and Pollux, Auriga B, and Capella. Most importantly, though, the lighting of the Kanupa and it's being smoked with dry willow is the real and actual renewal of the universe. It is also understood anyway. So this is going on, how she's explaining how they basically took and co-opted, and she goes on to discuss the Kabbalah and the Zohar, etc. here, how they co-opted the Native American religion with these dark arts and then sold it back into their culture, which she calls, she says, replacing the authentic knowledge and spirituality with the false spirituality given and carefully crafted by statecraft, and one might say witchcraft, i.e. sorcery derived from the Kabbalah, the Zohar, and the myriads of endless texts of dark arts throughout the ages, etc., and our intelligence agencies that Jan has so brilliantly exposed. The toxic mushrooms, peyote, and other hallucinogenic drugs have indeed been applied to both the dominant race and the remaining indigenous races to permanently confuse, obfuscate, and ensure the utter misdirection or any meaning of true knowledge. Worse, these substances are shown to be of demonic, leading to human horror. And then as she goes on a little bit more there, but as she says, one last sentence here, I forgot the most important constellation in the list regarding Canupa, the Pleiades, and got interrupted by barking dogs. So anyway, that's as fast as I can read it. Sorry that's so long, folks.
You should have edited that, unfortunately, because there are some really good ideas there, but there was a lot of information to take in so quickly. It's hard for a listener to get in.
Yeah, well, I apologize.
There's some real value because, I mean, just in general, what she's alluding to is an awareness that the Native Americans were targeted.
Yeah.
They were, and
and she's alluding to the fact that both cultures were targeted, and with the realization of that fact within the Native American community, that the whites have also been targeted, and then that means we can begin to focus on a new.
You're in touch with her. Can I suggest that she might be a great guest on our show, and if she can't do that,
she's already said she would come on soon.
Excellent. But the thing is that we really want to create coordination here. We want her information to get into the Native American leadership councils, and we want to extend invitations to all of them to come into the movements that's developing to expose the counterculture. We really want to get both groups in operation and awareness of one another and support of one another. And so, Jan, this is really, really good stuff. And, we didn't have enough time to go into Joe Smith. We might have to,
they did say that we could go long on this episode if you want to cover it a few more minutes here.
I don't have much time. So.
All right, but I should say that Joseph Smith was in the Burned Over district, which is near Woodstock, that we've already covered so much of, and that's where Mormonism originates. And also in the Burned Over district was Swedenborgianism, the Seventh-day Adventist, Jehovah's Witness, and then all of that stuff. So there is overlap between that. But, and then there is a lot of history that I expose in my first book, Astrotheology and Shamanism, that suggests that Joseph Smith did keep his congregation together through the use of drugs, especially Amanita muscaria, scopolamine, and later peyote. And so if we can prove that, so then what we have here is Joseph Smith is part of some secret society or group that's probably been carrying this information on since they were using it at Ulysses,
Absolutely. And remember that in our current era, that Mormons make up the largest fraction of recruits for the CIA. So this would suggest that there is some, mysterious background to the organization beyond its bizarre theology. Jan, I just want to take 1 second to say something. It's brand new. So I have a new website, CaesarsMessiah.com will now, in perhaps tomorrow or the next day, become this whole new website. And there's going to be a forum, which I will actually take questions on. I have participated in other, websites that I didn't really run. and haven't really, found much time to be able to like focus and take questions from the public and engage in just, back and forth. But I am going to do it. I'm inspired by your work. And so CaesarsMessiah.com is going to be the website that people will be able to reach me at. And it's going to have a lot of new features, and it's just going to be something that, hopefully we can all work together to bring this important information to the public, because I think, the topics we went through on this show, every one of them is extremely important. I mean, they may seem, academic or arcane, but I'm telling you, the idea that Jerry Brown can be brought on this show and answer questions, the revelation now that we can go back in time and see that drug use was being promoted to culturally debase in the 18th century, 19th century to Native populations, and that this then links into the operation in the 1960s. And then Jan's connection to the Indian representative. I'm not sure.
Kawana, he.
Sorry, thank you. Anyway,
Kawana Parker, he was the last appointed chief.
This is really, we're on a lot of fronts, but folks, we're inching forward. So support Gnostic Media. Go there.
GnosticMedia.com. Need lots of donations. I still need a new server. I've raised $850 so far towards a new server.
I now have a donate button on CaesarsMessiah.com. So I'd appreciate anyone who wants to donate to that cause. But also remember the network. The people here do also need help. So, if you can't donate physical money, then donate some time to help spread the word. Because all this information needs to get out. And Jan,
encourage others to donate too.
Yeah, Jan, really good information today, brother.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one, Joe. Take care, everyone.
Yeah,
all
good
right.
job.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye. Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into CCN. This unique network is dedicated to free and independent media. CCN was created with the belief that information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why our live stream high-definition broadcast is easily accessible and free to view. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Having produced over 1,000 shows in 2015, which are all archived on YouTube, we look forward to bringing you more groundbreaking, cutting-edge information in 2016. For more information on what is on, please check out our broadcast guide for weekly updates. CCN broadcasts in multiple languages and features some key voices of our challenging times who are all in pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. CCN belongs to you, the people, and it is up to you all to keep this network on the air. Please contribute to the Network Support Fund or visit the CCN shop. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.